If anyone in the chat can hear me, just push 1. All right, thank you for that confirmation. Welcome back to the Black Brain Trust. This is episode 759, Black Politics. Please hit the like button as you come in, share the video if possible, and hit that notification bell so you get all the updates from the Black Brain Trust. Also, if you want to get on the panel, there'll be a link dropped in the chat. All right, so it's been close to 90 days since the November election, the midterms, and as usual, you always see your political saboteurs, your instigators come around that time frame to really start ginning up, controversy. Now, we didn't say much at that time, but we wanted to give it some time. And what we ended up doing was waiting it out to see what the energy was going to be in the community, in the sphere, and other sort of venues, social spaces. And so what I ended up doing was doing some Googling just to see who's really paying attention. And I didn't see too many people who had their pom-poms out for, the saboteurs, the instigators, the grifters. I didn't see them actually keeping up with this. So I figured, let's cover was not being discussed. All right, let me share my screen real quick. Let me know if you can see my screen. Or maybe not. MLT, I sent you the link. Check your email. This is from sohh.com. And in October of that time frame of the midterms, this is usually early voting. I think early voting started around 10/17, around October 17th, but I think it ends around 10/26 too. And what I came across at the time was this. Ice Cube calls out President Biden for not meeting with him about Black America contract. Fans react, okay? Let me zoom in on this, maybe make this a little bit more legible. In the last presidential election, Ice Cube wanted both candidates to read his contract for Black America. Now, the West Coast legend is calling out President Biden for not meeting with him about it 2 years into his term. Legendary rapper, actor, and businessman Ice Cube recently called out President Biden for not meeting with him about his contract for Black America. And so on Twitter, Ice Cube says Biden still hasn't spoken with him about his contract with Black America. The aforementioned Black America contract mentions new business and economic improvements for Black Americans and legislative changes against racial injustice. Now, here's the Here's the backlash. Here's the discussion. In an interview on In Depth with Graham Bissinger, Ice Cube says President Biden nor anyone in his administration has contacted him about his contract proposal. Before President Biden's election, Ice Cube was called a sellout over meeting with representatives of former President Donald Trump to discuss the contract. In addition, Ice Cube also addressed his political views after controversy on social media. Fans reacted to the interview on Twitter, where most comments disagreed with the California artist. One user voiced his frustration by asking why Ice Cube is complaining about President Biden during election season. Quote, I still haven't spoken to President Biden about it. They haven't done anything to act on it, Ice Cube said. Users went as far as to call out the "Are we there yet?" actor for other reasons, such as accusing him of not having a plan for Black women or not asking former President Trump about discussing issues in Black communities. One user tweeted that she was disappointed in male rappers such as Ice Cube, Killer Mike, and Kanye West. She added that female rappers like Megan Thee Stallion, Cardi B, Rihanna would never. Ice Cube posted a video clip on his Instagram to get the attention of Black voters during the last presidential election. The caption was, quote, "But what's in it for us?" referring to what Black voters have to consider when voting for either party. And so that is the short of it. And here's the deal, okay? There's this idea in the Black community that, let me bring MLT in. There's this idea that all these entertainers like Ice Cube or Killer Mike somehow should be the voice of Black causes. And I don't know if people know that these guys are not elected, or these people are not elected. It's not like, oh, because he has a contract that suddenly everybody must stop and put their things down and listen to him, as if he knows better for Black people than the actual elected officials who sent those people to Washington and sent those people to the state to actually represent their views. And what has happened in the manosphere is that you had a whole lot of people who, by and large, did not keep up with this, right? So what they did was they basically let this story fall to the wayside, and then they moved on and started talking about other things like Stacey Abrams. All right. MLT, what's up, man? What you got on this?
Yes, I mean, the problem is most of these people want the image of Black masculinity. They don't want to go out and work for it. They want it to be represented by other people, like this clown that's on the screen right here. Like any person, normally in these neighborhoods and all these type of things, there are people who actually help get these people elected. Ice Cube is not one of those people. You can't point to any type of political anything that Ice Cube has done outside of his so-called, contract. Like, how does a person like this negotiate on the behalf of all people? Like, you don't have this with other groups of people. You just don't have it. But for people who have their suspect level of masculinity, it's just having one of these faces and one of these reprobate people to represent them, because he doesn't understand the process. He didn't follow it. The people who follow him don't understand the process. So him just going out there and just being seen around people for a photo op is action to these people. But they never asked the conservative side for anything, but they leverage the Democrats' ability to do everything. I don't know, make it make sense to me. I have no idea.
Well, that's what, one of the critiques were in the article, right? One of the commenters said that, you don't go to Trump talking all that stuff. You don't go to the Republicans talking about, contracts and stuff like that. And Ice Cube's response was, I just want Black people to make, I'm paraphrasing, I'm basically a more informed decision by asking, you know, what's in it for them, which is a legitimate question if you actually understood the process. But the thing here is, you're just coming out of the gate like, oh, well, what's in it for us? Well, why didn't you just do your own research, right? The Congressional Black Caucus, and we'll get to that in a second, already does an annual sort of report on what achievements they've done and what they fought for. And the pushback that you get from some of these anti-left activists is that, well, it doesn't say Black and it doesn't say male, or it doesn't say Black men, it doesn't say this, and this, right? But Black men benefit from it, or Black people benefit from it. And so they'll say the CBC didn't do anything, or Biden didn't do anything, or name your candidate, you know, or elected official didn't do anything, when we didn't go back and look at the track record, we see that, you know, in fact, they did do things, you just weren't aware of it for whatever reason, you were just uninformed. And so I find these things interesting because there were a lot of guys in this space in particular who were riding for Ice Cube, but then when the midterms disappeared, they were nowhere to be found for that, and in 2020.
Yeah, but for now, the normal cycle of things was forget about things, wait till 9 months before the election, and then pretend like you care. We're breaking up that cartel. You're going to have to show that you're involved the entire time, because other groups of people, they start organizing for the next election the moment the last election is over. Once they get the polls in, that's when they start circling the wagons. They don't wait till 9 months out, try to leverage the credibility of these so-called celebrities who's not involved with the process. I mean, but you have to understand that this is a constant thing that you consistently have to be a part of. And the ignorance of the actual process and outsourcing it is just outrageous at this point.
So let's go to the contract itself. This was posted in 2020, August 2020. This is from prnewswire.com. This morning, Ice Cube released a video titled "What's in it for us?" demanding politicians sign the contract with Black America before they get the support of the Black vote. As citizens and lawmakers both, we are joining to demand the contract with Black America be addressed immediately to finally create the more perfect union all Americans deserve. As such, it is time for a complete paradigm shift in how we run our institutions and operate our country. The problems facing America are too deep and wide to simply reform one area or another. Long-lasting solutions demand a comprehensive, thorough rethink of America so that each new approach in each area supports the success of the others. This contract with Black America will provide conceptual approaches in several areas. Derek Hamilton, in the preface to the contract, says, quote, "The contract with Black America strikes at the heart of racism and presents a blueprint to achieve racial economic justice." It was written in the backdrop of the killing of George Floyd, which set off a wave of protests not seen since the civil rights era of the 1950s and 60s, in a global pandemic in which the Black mortality rate is more than double the white rate, and in which 45%, nearly half of Black-owned businesses closed. The impacts of something presumably random, such as a pandemic, however catastrophic, can be so linked to one's racial identity is highly problematic, and further evidence that as a nation we are failing miserably. This links to a larger political and economic vulnerability, whether we're in a pandemic or not. The immoral devaluation of Black lives has been ingrained in America's political economy and is long overdue for a reckoning. This contract with Black America is a patriotic pathway to promote our shared prosperity and achieve racial economic justice. Ambassador Andrew Young is equally supportive. Quote, the pandemic has revealed to us the importance of the essential worker, of which many are minorities. We can grow no stronger without improving the sustainability of those at the bottom of the economic pyramid. The contract for Black America is a comprehensive step toward an action plan that addresses the future stability of minorities and essential workers across the nation. To address racial inequality, after reading the contract of Black America, we undersigned agreed to support and demand an open debate and a clear and fair vote within the first 100 days of the 117th Congress in 2021 on the following proposals to be codified into specific bills. Number one, bill to guarantee Black opportunity representation, adopt a plan of neo-reconstruction to redress past wrongs systematically imposed on Black Americans economically throughout many generations that has resulted in a wealth gap, where the average white family has 10 times the wealth of a Black family. In addition to some of the economic initiatives listed below, also formally apologize to Black Americans for past discrimination and slavery. Additionally, Black opportunity and representation will include affirmative action in schools, public and private, per student funding in states on an equal basis instead of paid by local property taxes. Black representation on all government civil rights bodies. Civil rights classes mandatory in elementary schools, gerrymandering reform, additional polling places in Black and minority neighborhoods, Juneteenth to become a federal holiday. Now let's think about this for a second. Republicans across, Republican governors and Republican elected officials across the country, more often than not, are against what they consider to be wokeness. That first paragraph, the first item on the agenda is all about wokeness, okay? Affirmative action in schools, they're reversing that all right now, in your face, okay? Go look at Mississippi. Civil rights classes mandatory in elementary schools, they just banned the AP African American Studies course. Like they have no interest in this, right? And so you're going to need bipartisan support. And as it stands right now, I don't know anybody on the other side in that other party that has any interest in this contract for Black America. What do you think about that, MOT?
I think it was just a huge outsourcing of everybody else to get it done. I'm going to start the conversation and I'm going to walk away and everybody else is going to do the work. And once the work is done, I'm going to take credit for it. Because a lot of people think that running up in people's faces and asking for things without a specific agenda or process is how things work. This is exactly what this is. Because you can infinitely leverage the people's ignorance who don't understand the process. And it's not like it's something that just happened overnight. It's been not understanding the process. This is why it makes no sense for people to be in the middle or to be on the right and only talk about culture warrior based things where this is an actual policy proposal. But a lot of people don't understand or care about policy unless it's already passed, it's already been done, and they just take credit for it or benefit from it without anybody else getting involved with it. And that's just not how it works. You have to organize all the time. Remember, they strung these people along for 40 something years before they actually got abortion overturned. And they're about to do the same thing with teaching, the teaching of American history. In Virginia, you didn't see any conservatives coming out telling that actual vice governor or the governor about the teaching of actual Black history in schools. And it's like, you even seen Ron DeSantis walk away from his own proposal abandoned so-called CRT stuff and blamed it on the teachers. I mean, so there's really no responsibility being held to the personnel who are currently in office, but they expect the left to do everything, and they just leverage the actual ability on just the left, and they don't do anything on the right. I think it's crazy.
Let's go to number 2. Bank lending reform. Bank lending will be regulated to require banks to lend a percentage of all loan and credit categories on an equal basis to the Black population each bank serves. However, the minimum threshold must yearly meet the percentage equal to the national bank population. Currently approximately 13.4%. Rates on Black loans federally and from the banks to be same average rates as whites. Let's think about this for a second. Let me pull up this screen right here. Let me see if I can find it. Yeah, here we go, right here. Let's see what we can see. Let me stop sharing my screen. Let me pull this up real quick. All right, let's try this again. Now, this is called, I don't know if anybody can see the screen, but
I
there
can.
may be a delay. Let me just give you a couple of seconds. Yeah, I think we can see it on the Zoom, but I don't think they can see it in the YouTube chat.
Yeah, I think it's 15 seconds.
Yeah, let me zoom this in. All right, this is from the federalreserve.gov, okay? Board of Governors on the Federal Reserve System. Community Reinvestment Act. What is the Community Reinvestment Act? The Community Reinvestment Act, enacted in 1977, requires the Federal Reserve and other federal banking regulators to encourage financial institutions to help meet the credit needs of the communities in which they do business, including low and moderate income neighborhoods. Three federal banking agencies or regulators are responsible for the CRA. Banks that have CRA obligations are supervised by one of these 3 regulators. Each regulator has a dedicated CRA site that provides information about banks they oversee and those banks' CRA ratings and performance evaluations. Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, Federal Reserve Board, Office of the Comptroller of the Currency. The Federal Reserve supervises state member banks or state charter banks that have applied for and been accepted to be a part of the Federal Reserve System for CRA compliance. To carry out its role, the Federal Reserve examines state member banks to evaluate and rate their performance under the CRA. Consider banks' CRA performance in context with the supervisory information when analyzing applications for mergers, acquisitions, branch openings, and shares information about community development techniques with bankers and the public. Okay, so this sort of work was established in 1977. What these guys are talking about in this contract with Black America, let me minimize this. This bank lending reform, you already have oversight for this that predates, this document that was written by Ice Cube.
That was done by Jimmy Carter.
So what are we talking about here?
It was done by Jimmy Carter.
Yeah, I was going to say that, by the Carter administration. Yeah. So what are we talking about here? Just really interesting. A lot of people who are pumping this up, didn't really do their due diligence to look into this type of stuff. Now let's look at number 3, federal funding of baby bonds. Passed federal program providing every child with a government-funded trust account at birth starting with a $1,000 contribution, as proposed by Senator Booker and Representative Presley. Accounts to be managed by the Treasury, and only those born into the lower wealth families would give more contributions each year, up to $46,500 total. At age 18, access to the funds allow but use restricted to asset enhancing actions such as buying homes, starting businesses, and funding education. Now, this was recently reintroduced by Congresswoman Presley last week. There are no members in a Republican-controlled House that support this legislation as we speak right now. So how are you going to get this passed?
Yeah, zero co-sponsors. Zero co-sponsors. But we got all these people on the right and all these people who are quote unquote in the middle who want this guy to represent us. But at the end of the day, he's never really talked to anybody. He just put out a plan that don't nobody know how it even works. And they just take that as, oh, well, we did something. We're running up in somebody else's face and we just asked them for something without understanding the process. It's crazy.
Number 4, the Federal Reserve and government pensions. For qualified Black Americans, Federal Reserve to allow a one-time interest-free loan for home ownership. The Fed, to ensure banks and institutions it oversees comply with bank lending reform. Fed to adopt modern monetary theory with goal of full employment and avoidance of actual inflation. Federal and state pension funds control over $1 trillion. They must allocate 13.4% of their investment into Black-owned businesses, enterprises and businesses. Venture capital and private equity funds that take money, public entities must invest 13.4% of their total fund in Black-owned businesses. This is kind of, let me say this. We don't really know what the Black population is. Saying that it's 13.4% doesn't make a whole lot of sense. We know that the census does not properly account for everyone in the country, including, and more specifically, Black people, if they don't participate in the census itself. Okay. We don't know how many Black people there really are. We don't know if the number is actually 13% at all. We just don't have an accurate count. And that's kind of what Stacey Abrams did in Georgia when she founded what's the organization she started, Fair Count. I think it's Fair Count. Let me make sure I'm saying the right thing because I don't want people coming back. You was wrong about that, Mike V. Stacey Abrams. Fair Count. That's the name of it. Fair Count. Fair Count. Stacey Abrams was founded by Stacey Abrams in 2019, anchored in Georgia. Fair Count works to build. Sorry, let me make sure I got this right. Yeah, sorry. Fair Count works to build long-term power in communities that have been historically undercounted in decennial census, underrepresented at polls, and whose communities are often torn apart in redistricting. Okay. I won't go into all the intricate details behind it, but that's basically what they were working on long before this was even discussed. And so in order to have an accurate representation of investment, 13.4, 14.5, 15.6, we really don't know the number at this point. And so to say that it should be an investment at this level, at this percentage rate, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It should just be equal to that of whatever everybody else was already getting. And so my qualm with this is that you're not going to be able to get this legislation passed on the Republican side. This is just not going to happen. Okay. Just not going to happen.
Again, all this can be solved by just having a public banking system rather than a private one. So that way they have to treat everybody equally. Business can refuse business and service to anybody. A public bank can't really do that. Something that's public can't really do that. And they've been fighting against, this type of public banking system for a while. I remember, what was it, about 7 years ago, Walmart said that they was going to start doing mortgages, and everybody in the banking industry went completely crazy. Yeah, because Walmart did it.
Hmm.
They would own every mortgage in the United States. Easily, they would own every mortgage in the United States. But at the end of the day, if you don't have a
They're the
free
largest
and fair,
employer.
yes, and if they are a free and fair system, and most of the money goes to them anyway, it would be better. But when you got people who do not participate in the process, don't know anything about the programs, everything had to be leveraged to the left, and there's really no input or even know-how by these people, and then all of a sudden they get some celebrity come by and just draft up some nonsense that has already been passed in several different points in several different fashions. There's an information gap. They don't realize that they're being played for a fool by the very people that they actually believe in. And rather than believing the facts on the ground, they go right back to those people because it's comfortable over there. They don't have to put in any work. It's already done for them, and no one else has to do anything else. It's crazy.
Hmm. Number 5, finance oversight. A banking commission or even a cabinet or sub-cabinet post will be set up to overlook and report on Black and minority lending, housing ownership, and mortgages, and enforcement of items 2 and 3 above. Such authority will also oversee and audit federal programs such as Economic Opportunity Zones and Community Reinvestment Act. And we just covered that earlier, Community Reinvestment Act, to determine who is benefiting from disbursement of such funds. Will provide a transparent reporting mechanism for abuses to economic programs designed to benefit communities in need. But that's what you have the Office of Civil Rights for, right? That's
Yes.
their job, is to see where the inequality is in violating all of these areas. But who's in charge of the finance committee? Well, we already have Maxine Waters, who's a senior member of the finance committee right now. So what you're suggesting is already in place.
Also, another thing is that
Number
you
6.
can always
Yeah, go ahead.
you can always repackage and represent things to people who don't know that these things are there. And the moment that they're told about these things, rather than hold those people accountable and responsible, they just ignore the information wholesale and just try to hold us responsible for even telling them in the first place. It's nuts.
Yeah, number 6, personal data and credit. Most states publicly release bulk data about arrestees unchecked. Like the 1970 Fair Credit Reporting Act regarding credit data, there must be guidelines regarding arrest records that allow similar privacy and accuracy protections and the right to dispute incorrect, inaccurate data. Credit services will be reformed to mandate consideration of individual consumer data on rent, utility, cell phone, and other like bill payments. I'm not, you're not going to be able to get bipartisan support on this. I mean, that's just out the gate. But let's take it at its face. In reality, medical debt is the biggest debt burden that impacts Black people as we see it right now. And then comes student loan debt, and then comes bad mortgages. And so with that being said, what you first want to do is remove medical debt from people's credit reporting. Done. Student loans should also be removed from the credit reporting process as well. You're not going to be able to realistically get any bipartisan support on this, and you're not just going to do it unilaterally through an executive order, right? The same people who are like, we don't want to see more federal overreach, right? These people who are against federal, too much federal overreach into the civilian areas, right? The citizens, right? You can't, on one hand, propose something like this and then say the government should get out of our way. The government is not so much in your way, but they're laying down, the asphalt that you need to ride on, to get to your destination. And this is a part of the process. And I think like a lot of these people who claim to be conservative will get behind something like this because Cube is behind it, but then not understand that all of this stuff is pretty much leftist ideals. I don't see why you're proposing it and then claim to be a conservative. I don't know. I don't get it.
Yeah, but you have to realize that people don't understand it. They just don't like the outcomes. Therefore, they're conservative. Like, no, you have to go after the people who made the outcomes and stop supporting the actual people who currently comfort the actual outcomes that are here. So they show up in large number over there, and then they claim to be conservative. It's like, it doesn't make any sense. And you have to understand that with this type of procedure, a lot of people think that screwing over other people is part of the free market. The moment you try to regulate a business from doing something screwed up to others, they call over-regulation every single time. So when you have people who don't participate, not knowing what the actual issues are, because after they go after Black people, you know who they go after? Rural whites. Same thing. People honestly think that somehow that you're protected because you're white. No, be white, be from a small town and not have any power. They treat your ass like everybody else in the country. That's the way that just simply works.
Number 7, prison reform. Privately run prisons will be abolished. Prison labor disallowed without consent, and nonviolent offenders incarcerated for 10 years or longer will be freed if good behavior standards met. All prisoners for marijuana possession freed. First offense for illegal drug use or possession to require government payment for entry into an approved drug rehabilitation program rather than imprisonment. Once any prisoner completes a complete sentence, voting rights are restored. And then like a rainbow comes out? No, man, like, see, you can't be against the left and then propose leftist ideals and then stand on your square as a conservative. It just doesn't work that way, man. It doesn't work like that. Prison abolition work has been done for the last, umpteen years, man. Like, Jericho, Until Freedom. There's a whole lot of prison abolitionist movements going on in the United States that have long, been around doing this type of work. And you see somebody propose an idea like this, and it's like, oh, what a novel idea. Yeah, we should do something like that. But try getting some folks from the other side to get on ball with it. I can almost guarantee you, privately run prisons benefit a lot of your elected officials who have an R next to their name. Trust and believe it. What did they do with the COVID relief funds? They took those funds and they used it to build more prisons. Go ask Alabama's governor.
But if you bring these things up, like, they're okay with leftist ideas as long as it comes from these proto-masculinity type frauds. But if it comes from us, somehow there's a problem. But they're in the middle or they're on the right. They don't vote, they don't participate, they don't understand what's going on. They require nothing from the right, but they're on the right. It's almost like I'm on the right because I don't want to learn anything about the process, and I don't want to be held responsible for things that currently the way that they are. So why don't I just act like I'm on a side that doesn't require me to do anything except for troll the left? This is what this stuff is about. And when you have people ushering this plan and inciting it, I'm like, are these so-called conservatives pushing straight up socialism on the other people? But it's okay if it's Ice Cube, but it's not okay if it's somebody on the left. Come on, man. Like, it's crazy that people don't understand this. It's nuts.
This is from the Southern Poverty Law Center, okay? For cruelty's sake, state of Alabama diverts $400 million in COVID funds to build prisons, leaving many in dire straits. Conservative-run state. What happened? All these conservatives in these black male spaces who want to uphold the idea that conservative-run states are run so well, how come they didn't use those $400 million in funds to, bail out people who were knee-deep in mortgage crisis or who were, one paycheck away from starving to death? I didn't see any of that sort of activism going on, but now you want to be, push leftist ideals and then try to say, look, see, we solved it. Look at this one bullet right here. Yeah, all right, man. Let me read this real quick. Jenny Eisenberg is an unemployed writer, but not by choice. The market she writes for has, quote, dried up, and her husband, who holds a doctorate in literature, also cannot find work due to a saturation of academics pursuing fewer opportunities. Their financial situation is, quote, not the best, and providing for a family of 6 has led them to live off food stamps. These are white folks, okay?
Yep.
At the same time, states across the country are using their share of the $350 billion in state and local fiscal recovery funds from the American Rescue Plan Act to support families and businesses struggling from the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic, to maintain vital services and to invest in communities. But in Alabama, rather than focusing on poverty, education, equity, or affordable housing, the legislature directed $400 million of its $2.2 billion in COVID relief to help fund the construction of 3 new mega prisons, further embracing a failed system of mass incarceration that for generations has disproportionately harmed communities of color and people living in poverty. So you want item number 7 on this agenda, prison reform, to be discussed with who? Who are you gonna have that discussion with? Who are you gonna have that discussion with?
Also, all other prison reform has been blocked by them wholesale. Every single time it's been blocked by them. So why would they be for prison reform when they have been the stalwart against prison reform in the first place, especially in these conservative run areas? Because most of these prisons are in conservative small town areas. They're the only employer. Yes, that's what it is. And so they won't, again, this is a liberal thing here to be fighting for this type of thing. But if you ask people about it, they think it's conservative to do it. So what they want is they want conservative to do liberal things and liberals to sit there and not do anything when they take office. I don't know, man.
Yeah. Let's move on to the next item on the contract for Black America. Number 8, judicial reforms. Eliminate mandatory minimums and 3 strike laws. The Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice reform through stricter guidelines and greater oversight over police departments. Department of Justice can be sued for non-compliance, lynching to become a federal hate crime, and the Ku Klux Klan declared a terrorist organization. What a novel idea, right? This is what frustrates me. A lot of your Black men in this space were backing this up, but then chastising the Congressional Black Caucus or other, the Progressive Caucus or the Latino Caucus, or name your caucus on the left, to make it seem like they weren't sitting on their hands doing nothing. But in reality, this sort of thing had already been in place. We already got, the banning of 3 strikes. We already got rid of mandatory minimums and stuff like that. But in some areas, you do need mandatory minimums. If you get caught with a firearm on school premises or state property, such as, or federal property like a courthouse or something like that, it's an automatic 1-year sentence, or automatic 5-year sentence, whatever the felony conviction rate is. I mean, that's just the reality. You can't have, this sort of, yo-yo sort of system that says, well, because you're Black, we'll just give you like 90 days, man. You can just go home. Like, what are you talking about, man? This dude had an AR-15 on a government, what do you call it? A federal court stairs or something like that. Like, you just can't do what you want when it's convenient for you. It doesn't work like that. And so mandatory minimums in some areas do make a lot of sense. 3 strikes, I think that, the guy who stabbed Paul Pierce, he got hit with 3 strikes, okay? He was on his 2nd strike when he stabbed Paul Pierce. The 3rd strike sent his ass away for 25 years, okay? That's how the 3 strikes law worked. And it worked effectively on those people. Okay.
Correct.
And
okay, so
you have to, go ahead.
All right. So There's a specific party who's against George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. There's a specific party who doesn't want to charge police officers whenever they do some type of criminal activity wrong. There is tons of Supreme Court decisions about expanding the police power that all come from the right. And it's like, again, a left-wing thing that left-wing people fight for in the hands of a culture warrior, all of a sudden is partyless. All of a sudden it's a good thing. When people continuously fight for these things across the country, get no credit for doing so. No credit. But this is, again, another left-wing idea that's being stalled by the actual conservative side within this country. But for some reason, we have to ignore all that because they're new to the conversation. I don't know, mind-blowing.
Making the Ku Klux Klan a terrorist organization? I mean, really? Like, is that where we're at right now? What happened to the Oath Keepers? What happened to the Proud Boys? What happened to the Patriot Front? Like, there's a dozen right-wing groups that could have been put on the terrorist organization list, but who's against putting those people on the terrorist organization list? You need bipartisan support to get things like that done.
Yeah, the Ku Klux Klan,
the House and the Senate. No, that's not true.
Yeah, but the Ku Klux Klan isn't even as big of a fact. I mean, they didn't try to overthrow the government. The Ku Klux Klan has never tried to overthrow the government. All these other groups did. And we never even tried to purge the military of these people who were part of these organizations. So if you don't know what's going on, you don't know what you're talking about, and you expect some culture warrior to just come in with a plan that's going to cover you all, you're going to continuously be looked at like a fool by these people.
Yeah. What's going on, Devon? You got something you want to add to this?
Oh, no, I know you guys were cooking it here real good. So I was just sitting here just listening because at the bottom line of what you're saying is that's exactly correct. I found it very interesting that, you know, they're talking about making the Ku Klux Klan a terrorist organization. You've had former presidents who were members of the Klan, but yet, you know, here we are, like you said, with some of these and there's some other extreme terrorist groups that are out here attacking people. What about that group that attacked they've been put in jail, but they have their offshoots that went after Governor Whitmer over there in Michigan and so forth. You have people out here literally trying to overthrow governments, local governments, and your federal government. And none of these people are being put on terrorist watch act. Like these guys are at a level that are at the level of Al Qaeda, you know, Al Qaeda or whatever other groups that they want to say, ISIL and ISIS and all that. These guys are even worse. No one's really trying to put these people in the place that where they need to, where they belong. But anyway, go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I wanted to read this off because Congressman Bowman was one of the biggest and loudest voices of HR 350, Domestic Terrorism Prevention Act of 2022. Okay. The bill establishes new requirements to expand the availability of information on domestic terrorism, as well as the relationship between domestic terrorism and hate crimes. It authorizes domestic terrorism components within the Department of Homeland Security, the Department of Justice, and the Federal Bureau of Investigation to monitor, analyze, investigate, and prosecute domestic terrorism. The domestic terrorism components of DHS, DOJ, and FBI must jointly report on domestic terrorism, including white supremacist-related incidents or attempted incidents. DHS, DOJ, and the FBI must review anti-terrorism training and resource programs of their agencies that are provided to federal, state, and local and tribal law enforcement agencies. Additionally, DOJ must make training on prosecuting domestic terrorism available to its prosecutors and to assistant U.S. attorneys. It creates an interagency task force to analyze and combat white supremacist and neo-Nazi infiltration of the uniformed services and federal law enforcement agencies. Finally, it directs the FBI to assign a special agent or hate crimes liaison to each field office to investigate hate crimes incidents with a nexus to domestic terrorism. Now, putting, the Ku Klux Klan on the terrorism watch list. I mean, Democrats have already been behind all this. Okay, Democrats wrote big bills on this, and this is one of them. You know who was against all this? The Freedom Caucus. Okay, where's the Freedom Caucus? With an R next to their name. Okay.
Very significant.
Democrats have already been large.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, Democrats have been hard at work. Yeah, it passed the House because, like others have obviously pointed out, Dems held the House. Yeah, at the time. But try getting that bill across now. That thing's dead in the water. You won't get any support. You won't get shit. Good luck.
Like I said, there was Zoe in the chat. You have to realize that if they wanted to abolish any rights for anyone, they have a supermajority in the Supreme Court. They're just going to make these people wait 40-something years before they do something about the LGBT movement. The same way they waited 40-some years to do something about the actual abortion issue. So, to me, when people start talking about LGBT issues, I think they're too stupid to be in a democracy. If you don't understand that those rights were given to them by the Supreme Court, 5-4 split, and they can be taken away by a 6-3 supermajority, this is not even an issue for you. Unless you're just too stupid to understand how the system works. And you understood it when it happened with abortion. So it's like, listen, man, you have to go through the correct and proper channels to get these things done. The Republicans are not even pushing for the removal of LGBT rights. I mean, they clout chase and they culture warrior off the issue, but they are never going to start challenging up bills all the way to the Supreme Court to get the actual issue removed wholesale. It's a non-issue. It's a non-issue.
Let me go to number 9, Police Reform Act. Police reforms will be implemented in an expansive act and that will, at minimum, include elimination of qualified immunity, requirement of mandatory malpractice insurance for police officers, make municipalities liable for unconstitutional actions by police, mandatory use of dashboard and body cams, elimination of chokeholds and, quote, no-knock warrants, establishment of residency requirements, de-escalation training and requirement to update training, severe penalties for evidence tampering, including withholding DNA, a federal database of police and disciplinary records established and made public, and once fired for cause cannot be rehired, creation of Office of Independent Prosecutors to solely focus on prosecuting police accused of wrongdoing, other reforms as listed in greater detail in contract with Black America. Again, Dems have been on top of this. Dems have been on top of this. So I'm not sure where, at the time when this was written and conceived, Dems had largely been on top of this.
And it's a very consistent that one party is against any type of police reform. It's very consistent, historically consistent, very consistent about what that is. I mean, you can't keep going over the same issue all the time when people just do not have an understanding of the actual process itself. Because it's always the gynocracy or feminism or LGBT is the reason why they can't get their act together, or read, or understand what the actual system is, or know the history of the country that they're actually in, but want to get behind Ice Cube with his left-wing plan, but there's actually left-wing people fighting for these actual ideas. No support from these people. Make it make sense to me, man.
Go ahead, Nicole.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Well, the sense of it is that the right they they don't have any sense on it. This is about pushing forward their agenda, their far right wing agenda. That's what we've seen when we started talking about Southern strategy and all that before, of which some people may be familiar with, some others may not. But as you start to use racialized dog whistling and so forth to bring certain kinds of support into your party, and really, using racialized dog whistles to galvanize you as a political force against you, this is what you're going to see, and it's going to continue. It's going to continue to grow. This has been going on for a long time, and now we're seeing it where it's really being pushed. And who do we see out front who's really pushing against it? We see almost no activity inside of the Republican Party, and we see most of the activity coming from the Democratic side. Now that's just how this thing is lining out at this stage. People can argue whatever, but this is what is going on the ground. And I don't know what else anyone really can say to this, but let's look at the facts here and address them as they are. And that's not comfortable for certain people who want to push certain narratives. But one of the things we have to do is consistently elucidate upon this and show folks exactly where we are with this. There's not a lot of fancy stuff to say. Mike is bringing a lot of this stuff up with right here on the screen, but here we go, and that's where we're pushing. The Black conservatives, I don't see them moving in any direction to slow any of this down. Mike, do you see any of that?
Yeah.
MOT, do you see that? But anyway, go ahead.
No, I don't.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so here's HR 1470, Ending Qualified Immunity Act. Okay. This is Representative Presley, Congresswoman Presley introduced this in the 117th Congress. The bill eliminates the defense of qualified immunity in civil actions for deprivation of rights. Qualified immunity is a judicially created doctrine that protects government employees or those acting with state authority from being held personally liable for constitutional violations. The bill provides that under statute, allowing a civil action alleging deprivation of rights under color of law, it shall not be a defense or immunity to any such action that, one, the defendant was acting in good faith or believed that his or her conduct was lawful at the time it was committed. Two, the rights, privileges, or immunities secured by the Constitution or federal laws were not clearly established at the time of their deprivation. Three, the state of the law was such that the defendant could not reasonably have been expected to know whether his or her conduct was lawful. Dems were already on top of this. So again, I mean, you have people getting behind this saying, number 9 Police Reform Act, but Dems have already been on top of police reform. The Congressional Black Caucus was already on top of this. CBC was already on top of this. So what are we talking about here? Number 10, FCC licensing of public airways. Broadcast networks will be required to air Black produced content equal to 20% of the total content on the network as measured by time. I'm sorry, was that some kind of life-sustaining, I mean, where does that fit in Maslow's hierarchy? I'm trying to understand. Are Black people starving for like FCC licensing or something like that to get their content played on the airways? I thought that's what they had YouTube for. I was told that you can fight from StreamYards. That's what I was told in here. You didn't need traditional media. You had the ability to fight from StreamYards.
Mainstream, manosphere, mainstream.
Unreal. All right, number 11, Confederate monuments and institutions, elimination of all Confederate statues and the uses of displays of Confederate flags on government grounds or property with public access. Rename all streets, schools, public structures, etc., named after Confederate soldiers or leaders. A memorial will be built in Washington, D.C. to the victims of police excessive force. But why would you build it in Washington, D.C.? Like why would Tyree Nichols, why would you build a monument of somebody like George Floyd in Washington, D.C., or build a monument of Tyree Nichols in Washington, D.C.? Where's the logic to that? I don't get that.
And what is the monument supposed to do? Where you could just fight to end the issue. Like, you don't need a monument of anything. You could just simply fight for the actual issues at hand. I don't understand it, man.
Yeah. AJP program for, yeah, go ahead.
Again, this is not a two-sided issue. I mean, I don't believe in monuments. I think that's pretty stupid. I just like, look, just end the program, just pass the bill, get rid of the actual thing. You don't need a monument to anything. But we also know who the people who were definitely against tearing down those Confederate monuments. Let's stop playing. Let's stop playing these games, man.
Yeah. So AJP program for education and programs. Adoption of AJP, a public-private program that provides access to jobs and education and or training for people willing to put in the work and commitment. I thought we had Peace Corps for that. I thought we had Job Corps for that, AmeriCorps. I thought we had all these sort of, programs in place. I could be mistaken.
Yeah, Cube Corps, like that's what it is. They need to come up with an Ice Cube Corps, so that way Ice Cube could just take credit for something that already exists. It's crazy.
Oh,
yeah. What's going on, Zoe?
Hey, what's going on, Mike? Yeah, I'm just.
I think Zoe.
Yeah,
hey, Zoe. I can hear.
Wait, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can. Go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, you guys are basically destroying so many talking points that you hear from a lot of dudes in this space. I mean, so let's take, for example, Confederate, monuments and statues. You hear it from many of these culture warriors from the right that they don't want that being done. But then you don't hear Black conservatives speak out against that. And the other point that I would like to make is like these Black conservatives, they don't know that they're being played as a fool. They don't understand that they're being played as a fool to kind of spread ignorance within the Black community so that the white conservatives can pass their agenda. Because let's be real, these white conservatives probably look at these Black conservatives as some dumb motherfuckers. Like the shit that they be saying just doesn't make any sense. It's all just like what MOTQ saying. It's all about culture. These cultural warriors, they're espousing these cultural warriors, but they're not focusing on the main issues. And I feel like these Black conservatives are kind of confused because, like you said, Mike, they're for left-wing ideals. Like, let's be real. A lot of these Black conservatives, quote unquote, be big into Malcolm X and all that. But okay, ask your white conservatives what they think about Malcolm X. Like, but they won't. I don't know. It just seems to me that they live in a different world. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, but this is a method actor type role that you get to get nationwide press. You get all this money for playing this specific type of step and fetch it role. It's just pretty much a role that people play. Like the actual Black conservatives who are actually can discuss policy, they few far in between. Most of these people are just these role players. And if you get a whole bunch of so-called Black conservatives in the room, they're all conservative for any different reason it is. Like they'll never be able to agree because they're all grifters. It's kind of like the conservative woman, also a grift. Like that's all it is. It's just a role to be played in public for you to get a whole bunch of attention off of, so that way you can connect yourself to the wingnut welfare system, where billionaires and millionaires will pay a whole bunch of money to watch a blackface say a whole bunch of dumb things that they know they don't believe, but they'll say anything for money. It's ridiculous.
This is Job Corps. Okay.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I just want to follow up on this. This is Job Corps. Okay. This program has been around as long as I've been alive. Let me go to the about. What is Job Corps? Job Corps is the largest nationwide residential career training program in the country and has been operating for more than 50 years. The program helps eligible young people ages 16 through 24 complete their high school education, trains them for meaningful careers, and assists them with obtaining employment. Job Corps has trained and educated over 2 million individuals since 1964. At Job Corps, students have access to room and board while they learn skills in specific training areas for up to 3 years. In addition to helping students complete their education, obtain career technical skills, and gain employment, Job Corps also provides transitional support services such as help finding employment, housing, childcare, and transportation. Job Corps graduates either enter the workforce or an apprenticeship, go on to higher education, or join the military. Sounds like a pretty progressive program to me. Well, I don't see, you know, I don't get it. I don't get how this ends up being, you know, number 12 on your contract for Black America. I mean, Black Americans, I can pull up the numbers if I had the time. I don't have the time right now, but I'm just going to kind of go through the last one. But the point here is that we already have programs in place. We have Job Corps, we have AmeriCorps, we have the Peace Corps, if you want to do international work. What are we talking about here?
And remember, Mike, you know, Job Corps, you know, as they say, this is part of the Great Society project set forth by Lyndon Baines Johnson. It's be part of that, man. This is part of that. Sergeant Shriver ran it. Big part of that. I just let's look at where this came from. All right. Anyway, go ahead.
What you're talking about, history and their history and their historic, you know, kind of neutral. Like all this stuff just sound like, you know, French or even German to these people. They was like, you know what, Cube said it, that's it, I believe it. It doesn't exist until Cube said it. And that's just the way it is.
And again, like they don't know that they're being used to undo these, just like what Nagon was saying, these are great society programs. And this is what the right has been, this has been their plan since, I mean, before Lyndon Johnson's FDR, they want to undo everything that, you know, that FDR did and Lyndon Johnson did. That's just, since Nixon, they want to undo all of that. But the problem is these Black conservatives, they keep spouting these talking points, but they don't know that they're helping with the process of undoing these programs that would help Black Americans. They don't know. Well, maybe they do know and they don't care because they're getting a check. I mean, that would be, you know, pretty fucked up. But I'm just saying, like, that they don't know that this has been a long-term battle that the right has been going on to undo these programs. New Social Security, you know, get rid of Job Corps. They said this. This has been in their policy plans for years. This is why they've been fighting for so hard, to get control of the Supreme Court, because they know that's the only way, because their policies are so unpopular. They know they can't win elections fairly, but all right, let's try to stack the Supreme Court. These people will be in the Supreme Court for life, get a right-wing supermajority, then we can undo all of this. And these Black conservatives, maybe they don't know, maybe some do know, they're helping to undo it because they're spreading this fake news or bullshit that it infiltrates the community. I mean, I see it on Twitter all the time. Like, you see some folks be spouting these talking points, and I'm like, you're helping the idea that hates you, but they don't get it. It's kind of crazy to me.
Let me go to the last item on the contract with Black America. Black responsibility, number 13. Chronic poverty creates an atmosphere full of negativity, frustration, hopelessness, depression, alcoholism, drug abuse, crime, and violence. These are some of the conditions that plague the Black community, which is dealing with extreme generational poverty. As we begin to gain social and economic equality, it is our duty to clean up ourselves and our community. This contract is a two-way street. As we gain social economic equality, we must begin to dissolve any bitterness in our hearts for past wrongs. We must become better citizens who are more productive on all levels of American society. We really must step up after we pass the contract with Black America with no more excuses left in the kitty. What? Our entertainers should be persuaded to deliver more positive content that leads our youth to make better choices in life. A new pride must develop with these new opportunities, and we must fight against negativity, frustration, hopelessness, depression, alcoholism, drug abuse, crime, and violence. It sounds like his contract is more. His contract is, it says it's a contract, it's a two-way street, but it seems to me like more of a cul-de-sac. It doesn't, you can't talk to people like this. I don't get it. MOT, what is going on here?
So it's like, we're going to do all the stuff we're supposed to do in society after you sign this contract. Why would they sign the contract if they already get everything that they want out of you by you not participating? Why on earth would they go sign a contract with you? What are you like? Okay, so we're just going to stop drinking beer and doing drugs the moment you sign this contract with Black America. And if you don't, we're going to keep doing these drugs and not participating until you sign this contract. What in the hell is the motivation for them to do any business with you if you already disconnected yourself from the progressive front without even asking anyone? It makes no sense. And these are the people with, Ice Cube shirts on saying that I trust this guy with my politics. What?
Yeah.
Unreal.
Go ahead, Azo.
Yeah, this is yeah, that part makes no sense. I mean, okay, you want us to sign this contract after like, oh, we stopped drinking beer and doing drugs, and I don't know, it's kind of funny coming from Ice Cube because if you're, I mean, I don't want to delve too much into, get gangster rap history, but if you remember back in like the late 90s well, late 80s and early 90s, there was, a push by older Black folks who were against gangster rap, and they were saying like this music is not providing any positivity to the youth. But then, Ice people like Ice Cube and the rappers at the time, they was like, man, fuck that noise. You just hating, blah blah blah. But now that Ice Cube is of that age now it's like, oh yeah, this new music, or this new influence on our youth, it's bad. But you want us to sign into this after? I don't know. It just seems all over the place. But it just goes to show that a lot of Black folks, unfortunately, they a lot of them supported Ice Cube just because of his celebrity status, just because of his name, but then they never looked into the proposals that he gave. And a lot of these proposals were already baked in the cake. But again, I don't know. It seems to me that, whoever was pushing Ice Cube to be putting these talking points was doing it in a way to cause confusion within the Black community because, how important the Black vote is. I don't know. that part just seems all over the place. Like you're saying this, we should have the youth do positivity and stop doing drugs, but then if you listen to the music that a lot of these folks was doing, back in the day, it was against that, especially during the crack era. I don't know. It's crazy.
Zoe, you're hitting you're hitting it pretty much on the head. I have to say, I remember reading the auto. I hate to bring this up, but I remember reading the autobiography of Malcolm X years ago, and he spoke on black. He warned about the pitfalls of black celebrities, and stated a lot of these guys come out here and they're often out of step with the visions and so forth of work class and other poor black folks. They kind of out of step with things, not really seeing things properly. He made a real wise comment, and said, hey, somebody show me where you have the white community where a singer or a white leader or a dancer or somebody like that is a dancer or a band player or something like that is a leader of their community. Where is that? Thought that was real crazy. And looked at these people as political puppets. In order to kind of more or less kind of control, somewhat of the masses and kind of control how they're going to move, and they're being put up by others, if you will. Malcolm said that. He said that over well over 50 years ago, and it just comes to my mind because it seems to be once again very accurate, very accurate. So this agenda that this man is coming up with, stuff that's already been done, stuff from the Great Society programs, and a lot of this stuff. What's he really trying to? What was he really trying to pull here? And I saw many of my friends and others who were looking at this individual like that. That's not my leader, or whatever. But anyhow, you have to look at this somewhat, somewhat suspiciously. We're kind of laughing at it, but I'm not trying to go in so super hard. But I just don't see, just just don't see it, man. This is out there. But anyway, Mike, go ahead, man. Go ahead, please.
Well, what really catches my attention here is we really must step up after we pass the contract of Black America with no more excuses left in the kitty. Who wrote this? Like, where's your PR person? I don't understand how you can have such. I mean, this is written like a blog or something like that. Like, I don't get it, man. I feel like Black men need to take a course on a TED Talk or something like that, a course on leadership. Like, they don't seem to really have a clear understanding on the difference between lecturing versus actual leadership, man. It just seems really strange that a person who used to produce movies where they sip, 40s of old English and St. Ides and whatnot, are the same guys telling you that we have to get rid of all the crime and the alcohol and the liquor stores and all that other stuff and the alcoholism. Like, what are you talking about? Well, you would solve the alcoholism problem by funding more clinics, not clinics, but rehabs and detox centers and other forms of social infrastructure. Why aren't we talking about funding those things? I don't get it. There's this idea that we have to legislate people's behavior only in the Black community, not anywhere else, only in the Black community.
Yeah.
Alonzo Hall, what's going on, bro?
So I'll make this quick point. And the thing is, you see this talking point, I'm not trying to delve off the topic, but you see this talking point within, hip hop circles, where it's like, oh, back in the early 90s, those conscious rap music, but then you had the NWAs and this, that, and the third, like, oh, there was this agenda, which I agree, those are an agenda to push gangster rap, okay, but these same people who's pushing that gangster rap music back then, they're talking about, oh, we have to do better. But you was making music about killing all the Black men, selling drugs and whatnot. But then now, I'll take, for example, like in New York, we have, drill music, basically influenced by Chicago, and a lot of New York rappers that were talking about, selling drugs or killing other black men are against these new generation of rappers that are talking about, killing black men. So it's like, but you was doing the same thing back in the day. Like how am I supposed to take you seriously when, yeah, in 2023 you're against that, but then 2003 you was making that same type of music. So it's very hypocritical, and you want to legislate how black people, no, you want to legislate how black people do things, but then again you call yourself a black conservative, and you want the government off your back. It's all confusing. That's why I don't take a lot of these alternative black political talking points seriously, because it just doesn't make sense. Like like recently, not to expand this any further, but like recently I've seen on Twitter like black conservatives that are for reparations, but then they'd be surprised and upset that they see there are white conservatives that are throwing up the middle finger against reparations. But I'm like, yo, don't you understand that these so quote unquote allies will never support reparations? But they just they just lack education. That's just what it is. So to me, it seems weird and hypocritical. Back in the day, you was against this type of music, against drugs being sold in the, well, back in the day you was pushing that, but then now you're against it. I don't know. It just seems odd, very odd to
Mhm.
me.
Salute, gentlemen. Um,
Well, did
so I do want to be a little bit contrarian to the fact that yes, a lot of these gentlemen did uh, some not so or some risque things and didn't have the best messages in their music. However, I believe it was Muhammad Ali who said, a man at 25 is not the same man at 45. So what ends up happening is, unfortunately, it seems to take too long because, as you mentioned, in 2003, a lot of these guys were 25 or even 30, and now in 2023, they're 50, and they're finally turning the corner. However, we do have to give a little credence to the fact that in life, as especially as a man, you should grow and evolve. But I definitely understand not taking, Ice Cube quite seriously when it comes to the contract for Black America. I think one of the things that if, these specifically rapping entertainers want to be taken seriously, they should just, I don't want to listen to Killer Mike. I want to listen to Mike Franklin or whatever his name actually is, right? So denounce your rap name. We understand that that's the character that you portray for entertainment purposes, and then come out as Mike Franklin. I don't know if that's his actual name. And then, we can actually have some political prowess behind you. I mean, let's not forget that we did have an actor as a president by the name of Ronald Reagan. We had a wrestler by the name of Jesse the Body Ventura, who then became Jesse Ventura. We had an actor by Arnold Schwarzenegger, who became a governor. Now, again, these men also are not viewed as a monolith by the community at large, as Black men generally are, regardless of your beginnings or nationality. In America, we are viewed as a monolith if you have a skin tone that is similar to mine or darker. And that is one thing to be cognizant of. However, and I don't want to, take up too much time. I heard the other gentleman mention, like Brother Malcolm X said, and I think that's very, very, very true as well. But it seems like in our community, unless you are an entertainer or an athlete, our people don't want to listen to you. An excuse will be, well, the Black politicians who get in office don't ever do anything for Black people. But I don't think that we as Black people completely understand the root or the way that politics works. It works based on economics. It works based on money. So the reason that the Asian hate crime bill was passed so swiftly is not only because every man, woman, and child in America owes China $15,000, but the Asians who became a monolith, because you got, Chinese, Cambodian, Vietnamese, so on, came together as a monolith, put their money together, and purchased political power, just like the Hispanic Prosperity Initiative. A multi-billion-dollar corporation, Goya, came to Donald Trump and said, we'll consider giving you our votes if you pass this bill for us. Dr. Claude Anderson has mentioned for many decades that as a community, in order for us as a whole to have any political power, we need to buy or at least rent these politicians, regardless of the ethno-phenotype of the politician. And that's a major way through economics, like you guys were talking about trucking the other day in that industry, right? Why is it that in 2017, 31,000 Sikh men came together and got trucks, yet in these spaces, we'll hear one or two Black men saying, yeah, I make $100,000, $200,000. Well, Alonzo Hall's Trucking LLC, who makes $200,000 a year for myself, when I have to do all the logistics and the travel and this and that and the third, versus the Singh Bros LLC, where they put 3 guys in one truck so they can deliver 3 times as fast because there's a guy sleeping, 2 guys sleeping, 1 guy driving. And so now they get right of first refusal, and now they're able to have their community dictated how they want. Every ethnotype outside of Black Americans has a little Italy, Chinatown, little Haiti, little Havana. Well, little Haiti is subjective, but little Havana, right? So where do we begin to break in? And I'll pause there.
All right, I'll say this very quickly. It's just not money that when we looked at Black America to a large extent at its most politically powerful, most successful in so many ways, pushing a large part of these tremendous legislation, civil rights and so forth that really has helped many Black people move further into the middle class and push forward along with that much of the union movement that was linked up with this. A lot of people don't really realize or speak about that a lot, but it wasn't just money that did it. What you really had was very well politically organized community, very well organized, and it didn't just revolve around money. It revolved around your life, your community, your survival. Money played a role. There's no doubt about it. You had entertainers like Harry Belafonte. We're going back now, and others who Bill Cosby.
That's the GOAT.
Who was part of it, and others who were very, very, very big entertainers. They played a role, but they weren't out front. They weren't your leaders in that. They were your big time supporters, but your charismatic leadership really came from the people itself, and it was more of a grassroots type of movement of people who were relatively poor, didn't have a lot, but they were very well politically organized in their communities at night, in their churches, and so forth. And this is how you really were able to shake some very powerful institutions. And when we talk about the Ku Klux Klan, which was an institution, very deeply entrenched in much of your institutions that you had. So when people talk about your police and your military, and we got these white supremacists, and they've always been there. It's not they just came in and just started to infiltrate. They've always been there. But you had a very powerful movement that was really, that really coalesced to help to really bring a lot of that forward. So it's just not money. It's also organization, and you have to have an organ that helps to bring about a lot of very, very true information and keep the information very, 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 very truthful as to what's going on. And keeping people well motivated behind that as well, and galvanizing your communities. It's not one Black, monolithic community, but your communities that make up the Black community on the whole. And that was money, but it was a lot of organization was involved with that as well. So I just want to make sure that we keep our eyes on that and not just look at it from the standpoint of just just of cash money and dollars. Is that
Understood.
that's not entirely accurate. That's a part of it for sure. But
Inside of that,
there's a lot more. Yeah.
Yeah, let me
sorry. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well,
yeah,
inside of
let me
that,
get to this.
oh, go
Yeah,
ahead.
let me get to this article. Yeah, let me get to this
Okay.
article. Yeah, this is from Yahoo. Blavity, to be exact. The audacity. Killer Mike compares himself to MLK after meeting with Republican Governor Brian Kemp resurfaced. Rapper and social activist Killer Mike proudly toes the line of being politically correct, although this time he might have jumped well over the line of delusion. Mike, legally known as Michael Santiago Render, has not been shy to share his views on each candidate in the Georgia primary. In a recent episode of Comedy Central's Hell of a Week with Charlemagne the God, Mike ran down his thoughts on each candidate, Democrat Stacey Abrams and current governor, Republican Brian Kemp. He began with criticism of the Democratic Party's inability to come through on past promises to the Black citizens of Georgia. He continued to call some of their tactics condescending, including implementing the voting theme, no voting, no bucking. Blavity previously reported that the catchy jingle featuring Trina and Saucy Santana was made to get the Gen Z excited about voting. The single is included in several voting initiatives led by the dating app BLK. During the episode, Mike continued to harp on what's not working for the Democrats, and he touched on Abrams' campaign. His advice was, quote, whatever white person you got running your Black outreach, fire them. Quote, the go out on the town rapper reprimanded Abrams for her lack of, quote, Black community involvement and unclear stance on the legalization of marijuana. For every negative stance that Mike pointed out about Abrams, he seemed to have a positive rebuttal about Kemp. He praised Kemp for, quote, running an effective campaign. He openly admired Kemp for his recent visit to, quote, to an all-Black boys' school run by a conservative Black man down in Albany, Georgia. Quote. He said that he couldn't, quote, he couldn't have been more proud of Kemp's work reaching out to the Black community, comparing it to what he saw as a deficit on Abrams' end. Mike's approval of Kemp raises eyebrows because the Georgia governor has consistently been accused of voter suppression and specifically preventing Black people from voting. After the episode aired, a 2020 photo of Mike meeting with Kemp and his wife resurfaced. The photo of the governor and Mike shaking hands and sitting down is captioned, quote, today, Marty and I had a great meeting with Killer Mike. We discussed how small businesses and the music industry are weathering the pandemic, the value of our skilled trade workers, and our fight to end human trafficking in Georgia. We look forward to seeing him again soon. Followers saw the photo op as Mike playing the Black friend role to aid Kemp in refuting racist labels. The picture and Mike's commentary rubbed some fans the wrong way and caused some to even question his motives. Mike's reply to the fan was an analogy to that only worsens matters. Anyways, that's kind of the end of it. There was a back and forth in Twitter, but that's kind of insignificant. But the point of the matter here is Killer Mike made it seem as if he went, to go see LBJ. He puts himself in the same shoes as Martin Luther King, which are really big shoes to fill. MLK didn't sing or rap or anything like that. He was MLK. I just think that both he and Ice Cube have some significant issues from a PR perspective. They're too visible and largely unnecessary for the greater Black politic. I don't know what you think about this, MLT. Comparing himself to Malcolm X, MLK. Oh, he's gone. So anybody else feel like they want to jump in?
I mean, Killer Mike comparing himself to MLK? Really? What qualifies him to look like an MLK? What has he done on an MLK type level to say that? I mean, this is delusions. I mean, I don't. There's no need to sit here and argue. This is delusions. Delusional guy.
Mhm.
It's crazy to see this, but yeah, I don't. Anyway, go ahead, Mike. Go ahead.
Well, what I think about the article is that I think, I mean, I hate to even say this. I think this comes from basically what Killer Mike was kind of doing. I don't know if he's aware of this space, probably is, that he kind of tried to bring that gender war nonsense kind of to the public by saying like, oh, well, see, Kemp, he visited a charter school that represented Black boys. And yes, for me, I think it's important, for Black boys to, get a voice, because you kind of hear this talking part within this space, like, there's more focus on Black girls than Black boys. So a lot of times what these, a lot of men in this space would do is, like, if a Republican, all a Republican has to do is appear in a charter school with, Black boys, and that's enough for them to kind of say, see, I'm supporting that because they're against a gynocracy, quote unquote. So I guess that's what Killer Mike was kind of getting at, like, oh, Kemp appeared in this, charter school with Black boys, and that's enough for me. But let's be real, like, these, I always say this, I mean, I don't always say this, but, my parents always says, this Republicans are very ruthless when it comes to politics. And the thing with Republicans, they do their research, and they probably feel like, you know what, campus probably, let me just show up in a Black boy charter, and it's a charter school, and then this will be enough to garner enough support with some Black men, and this will kind of, divide and conquer the Black vote. I mean, the Republicans are not stupid. They do their research. These are some of the most politically savvy people in this country. They'll do anything for power. So Killer Mike kind of fell for it, and we saw the result with the Georgia gubernatorial, election. And yeah, I think it just goes to show a lot of our people really lack political, tact. And it's interesting what Nagone said earlier, that it was just not money that helped, the for example, the civil rights movement. A lot of the people who led the civil rights movement also had geopolitical knowledge too. They kind of brought this, like, hey, listen, if you don't give us rights, it's going to be unstable. If you don't give us rights in the 1960s, you think this is going to be sustainable in the 80s. So they use their leverage to get what they want, and I think that's what's lacking today. I've always said that, Black Americans can use leverage to say, hey, listen, this wealth gap between Blacks and whites, this is not good for the long-term stability of this country. So something has to be done. If not, then it's not going to keep this country strong. There's a complete lack of basic political, geopolitical knowledge, that you can be played as a fool by, the right, and sometimes by the left. So yeah.
So real quick, can
Let's
I
go to
ask,
Alonzo Hall.
what's your age range? Are you in your 20s?
Well, I'm 32 right now.
You're 32. Okay, so you just left your 20s. So the reason that I wanted to say that is because something that you harken back to that Nagone mentioned earlier, which was about the political astuteness. One thing we also, or the organization and as such. So, number one, something that you mentioned about specifically Republicans, politicians are puppets, just like rappers. And the people who are very smart and do the market research are campaign managers. That's what those people, such as Bobby Seale, etc., were. Remember, a lot of these political activists were in their 20s and died around 28, 27, 26, right? Huey Newton, I'm not sure how old he was when he was killed, but these people were in their mid to late 20s when they were conducting these revolutions, because they weren't these older gentlemen like Ice Cube, like Killer Mike, whom are of a certain age and have certain responsibilities and things that they've grown accustomed to. It's a young man's game. So they have the energy and the enough to be able to risk things, to actually be those whom make those changes, right? Again, at 40, you got a wife and kids, a mortgage. Look, I'm not trying to ruffle too many feathers. I got stuff and people that depend on me. At 20, it may not be the same. But in terms of the article, I think it may be kind of just something to look into. What ends up happening often, there is a turning point with a lot of Black men who have responsibilities and are well-to-do. Most African Americans in this country traditionally held more, if you will, conservative views, standpoints, beliefs, right? Liberalism is a fairly new phenomenon, but most things were generally created to benefit white women, right? And so this may be another thing that benefits white women, which in turn benefits white men. And I know Killer Mike was, ironically enough, in wearing a green shirt. I believe he was more of a Green Party person. But again, with our people, it always has to be, some rapper or what have you. I have friends who ran for office here in Connecticut, and they're young. They're about 30, 32. Yet nobody is trying to follow their message. So the elders, such as ourselves who are in our 40s, 50s, and beyond, have to pass the baton to those who are in their early 30s and early 20s, or early 30s and under, to actually make those changes, right? Actually do those things and put them in force. But I'll pause. Actually, before I pause there, another reason for us probably needing the artists and entertainers. If you've not seen, there's a good documentary via PBS called Boss, The Black Business Experience, where it mentions the avenues that initially helped Blacks to even have the wealth to create our own. We started in the hair care industry, went to insurance, went to real estate, and then we started doing, things outside of sharecropping that actually allowed us to create our own economy and have a political power and prowess and organization and our own microcosms and communities. It was subgroup economics. I think a major issue is, unfortunately, the dollar only circulates in our community for 6 hours. I believe it's 12 days in the Hispanic community. I think it's 20 or 14 days or I think it's 6 days in the Hispanic community, or 8 days, 14 days in the Asian community, and like 26 days in the Hasidic community. So our dollar is unable to circulate in our own community for an 8-hour shift or a full-time shift at a regular job. So check out Boston Black Business Experience, okay? Because it shows that it ended up being entertainment that was our last venue. So that's why we look there for a lot of our leaders, and I'll pause there.
Renaissance Man, what's going on? What do you have on this?
Hey, what's up, Mike? What's up, panel?
Chilling, bro.
Yeah. I think being someone who used to be an Atlanta resident, Killer Mike is one who's been sort of in the political scene, both locally and I think on nationally. Really, he really got more prominent with him being involved with the Sanders campaign in 2016. That was a big thing for him in the national stage. At the local level, as far as Atlanta politics go, he's always been pretty vocal, pretty visual. When the first mayor, most recent mayor, Keisha Lance Bottoms, got elected, he was actually there at her transition team meeting. They had basically the kickoff for administration, so he had a voice there. When they had the George Floyd riots, and you obviously had George Floyd protests, and you had a few protests turn violent in Atlanta. He was one of the people that actually went on TV, basically was telling people to be calm, don't destroy the city, this and that. So he's always kind of been there. I think what he was attempting to do with this is I think in his mind, I think he was trying to win some political cachet with the governor, mainly because he did this at a time when Stacey Abrams was she was trailing off in the polls, in the sense of the general consensus was by this point that she wasn't going to win. So I think he was trying to think in that form, but then also where he kind of gets himself in trouble a little bit is that his politics are a little bit all over the place a little bit. He can be very much an advocate of a pro-Black politic that's very much almost like a Black capitalist message. But then, he's very much someone who, like I said, was endorsing Bernie Sanders, was pushing him as well, too. So it's kind of hard to read his motives. The problem I think I have with him is, he does have some political knowledge. He is a lot more knowledgeable than people in his profession, as far as rappers, entertainers in general. He's a lot more knowledge politically there, but he's not more knowledgeable than the people who do the work every day. And that's where I think a lot of these guys kind of overstep their bounds and kind of make themselves look bad, is they don't really understand the game to the level that they need to. And they end up in situations where they look, like I said, people look confused about what their motives are, or they end up kind of contradicting themselves. And I think that's kind of what happened here. Because like I said, if you understand Kemp's politics, he's not even like the most recent governor, Nathan Deal's politics, where Deal was very pro-business, but for the most part, he kind of stayed away from too much of the culture war issues. Kemp was a lot more engaged in like culture war issues, passing like constitutional carry, rolling things like that back, blocking, obviously, continuing to block the expansion of Medicare, Medicaid. So he's not your pro-business type of Republican governor that they had for the past few years. He's more of even though Trump threw him on the bus, he's more of a Trump out of that Trump cut of a type of governor. So like I said, I think he was trying to win some points here, and I think it hurt his profile.
What do you see happening in 2024 with Killer Mike? You think he'll turn back around?
Oh yeah, no.
Someone's campaign. What do you see him being at?
Oh yeah, no, I think definitely he will be in the political process. I don't think he's as bad as these other, some of these other people who are out here saying, he understands, at least he is the way he's expressed himself. He understands the importance of like voting and primaries and things like that. Because I have heard him speak. I think his grandmother was into local politics, so he talked a lot about, how he went to various local organizing meetings. So I think he gets that. So I don't think I'd be very surprised if he was one of these people who was kind of out here, kind of like, oh, I don't know, should we look at DeSantis? Or should we look at Trump? Should we, Biden is old, and this is, I don't see him being that. I definitely see him being someone who's going to who will be out there pushing for the reelection of Biden, just because, with Trump, what he is, what he's about. And DeSantis has made it pretty clear on where he stands on, like Black studies, Black history courses, like things like that, arresting voters. So I think he'll still be there and have that profile, because he does own, like I said, he does do a lot in the city. He does own several businesses in the city. I know he's talked about, as well as several blocks, like as far as different neighborhoods as well too. So he is very active locally. It's just, like I said, I think he was trying to score some political points because he knew this is going to be the governor for the next 6 years, and I think kind of backfired a little bit.
But he didn't know that. You mean 4 years, not 6?
Yeah, I'm sorry, 4.
Yeah, but he didn't know that in 2018, because we remember that Stacey lost by 55,000 votes.
Yep.
Yeah,
he was.
We know that there was some business. No, what I'm saying here is he would not have known that I guess there must be some kind of delay. I'm saying he would not have known that Kemp would have came out, as the top runner, for governor. I don't, because it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense to get behind him if you supported Bernie, because Bernie is the complete opposite of Kemp.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like I said, I think because this article is dated October 25th, 2022. Obviously Kemp won in November. So I'm saying at this point, in that, even in that lead up in the summer, I'm saying in this most recent one, yeah, he was on board in the State Abrams campaign in 2018. Like I said, I think this shift is because people don't realize 2018 Stacey Abrams, like you said, came within 55,000 votes of winning, which is not as much as it sounds when you look at how many people were purged from voter rolls, the number of people who didn't vote, all of those things. So ironically, her second time around running in 2022, she actually performed worse than she did the first time, which is there's a myriad of things. Some people advocate say that, hey, 18, she had she's never been new on the political scene, but she was new in as far as people know her household name, things like that. Versus this time, people knew who she was, coupled with I think the Black support was not as strong as it once was back in 2018. So like I said, with him, he knew that at around that point, and that's why I think he was like, hey, I can at least get in good with the administration that's going to be there from like 2022 to 2026.
Mm-hmm.
So that's like I said, that's what I think his motives are, because like I said, it makes no sense because he's also in you brought this up with, that's why I mean he sort of goes to that capitalist angle in a sense, is that he's very big. He was very out front with Greenwood. Now granted, we've talked about the different type of banking institutions that are available. He was very much one of the biggest spokesmen and pushers for it. But people I don't know if people realize it does have corporate money involved as far as its like initial investments. I believe it was acquired most recently in like the past year or two by by, I believe it's Panasonic Ventures, maybe. So, but it was another black VC firm that bought them out. But like I said, he's been on that sort of angle of, we've talked about things like the Bank of North Dakota, what banking should look like. I'm not saying this is a bad thing, but like I said, he does play a little bit of that black capitalist angle as well.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that. Oh,
no, go right ahead. Go right ahead.
yeah. So it's interesting that that it was mentioned that he was a very big Bernie supporter, and you see this phenomenon with a lot of people who supported Bernie Sanders back in 2016. They say this term like they got black pilled, and a lot of them went a lot of them voted for Trump in 2016, and they kind of say that right wing course where when 2016 happened, they thought that this was the chance that Bernie would be the Democratic nominee for president, and that major change would come because a lot of these people felt you know hard done by that. Obama had 8 years and didn't really do much. That's what they say. That's what you see these white former liberals say this. A lot of them said they were black pilled after Occupy Wall Street, and then after Obama, and they went for Bernie, and then when they think quote unquote Bernie got the nominee stolen from him by Hillary, so they kind of were on some like you know fuck the Democratic National Committee. I'm gonna support Trump or whatever. So I don't know if Killer Mike is on that type of wave, but it's interesting because from what I've seen, people who supported Bernie back in 2016, a lot of them have interesting political viewpoints, and they kind of support the right, like to kind of troll the DNC for payback. That you didn't give Bernie a chance. That's what it seems. That's the trend that I see. That's the trend that I've seen. In the 2018 elections, 2020, and kind of 2024. Like they're just on some. I don't know. It seems anecdotal, but people who I've seen like back in 2016 that were pro Bernie are like supporting DeSantis and Trump for 2024. It's a weird transition that I don't I wouldn't say I don't understand, but it seems along some like fuck you guys, we're going to make the DNC pay for what they did to Bernie so they can understand that a person like Bernie is the way to help the DNC win elections. So I don't know. I'm just ranting.
Yes. Yeah, no, this is interesting because this came out of the chat from Rael. He posted this. Bank Black movement gets lift with $45 million investment in startup whose founders include Killer Mike and Andrew Young. This is complete opposite of Bernie Sanders, though.
Yeah,
This is complete opposite. And so,
yeah, like I said, he owns several businesses in the city. I know he owns several barbershops. He goes into the talk about, hey, like I remember in one of his shops, he always talks about like when kids get a haircut, they get a toy car to encourage like their interest in like skills and trades and things like that. And he's like, oh, my son basically is going to work here in the barbershop, and then he can go to college as he wants to, because he's not really the school type, versus I think his daughter is, kind of more, in his mind, at least, suited for higher education in that regard. So he does have a lot of those talking points that are on what we consider on the right, in the sense of, like I said, business owner, really pushes the ideas of trades and things like that for Black men. But the problem is like the other linchpin that's really not talked about that is the need for unions. And, good luck having a big push for unions in Georgia, at least right now. I mean, people aren't, it's a deep, I shouldn't say it's a purple state, but there's something people are very much still against.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that's my thing that, you know, yeah, you invested or you were able to be a part of an investment of $45 million into a startup, but that doesn't, we already have black banks, right? I don't get why that is that, to me, it's not impressive. I'm not impressed by a black bank. Black banks already existed long
Now,
before Mike came around. So,
yeah, now, Mike, I will say
go
that
ahead.
one thing that's kind of unique about this one is that it's like completely, I believe it's completely digital in the sense of you do have the card that they'll send you, but all of your banking is done online. It's not a brick and mortar type of bank like I believe what Citizens Trust or things like that. So it's not like that. And I think, Grant, I'm not saying this is I'm not saying this is a big difference, but I think too that like they've promised like a percentage of like maybe like if you open a savings account or their profits, that they push the whole angle of, hey, you'll be supporting the community as well, in the sense of like, hey, we're focused on giving out loans and capital to other black businesses, coupled with I think there is some sort of charitable element as well of investment in the community. So I mean, like I said, it's a model, but it's still very much on a capitalist bent when you know what's out there. Like I said, we talked about the Bank of was it Bank of North Dakota, I believe.
That's a public bank, though.
Yeah, that's a public bank versus this is a privately owned one.
Yeah, I mean, the One United already has all of those features. I've really I haven't been in One United probably since the pandemic started. I think the last time I went there was when I was going to Rwanda. I withdrew some money from the ATM, but I don't go to the branch. Even though I live down the street from it, I don't go to the branch. I don't need to go to the branch because all of it is done digitally from the app, and so. I think there's a lot of misperception about black banks in the sense that they think, black banks are somehow technologically behind, let's say, Bank of America or something like that. In reality, it's not. They're actually pretty futuristic with their ideas. The ability to have mobile to mobile money. Now they're working on some different innovations coming from the cell phone and the smartphone, tablet functionality. When I was in Africa, and I called them for support, they're actually planning some operations in on the continent. And so I just think that they look at this and they think, oh, well, Killer Mike's all about the business. And I'm like, well, we've already had, there's already enough black banks. Well, I shouldn't say that there's enough, but I'm saying I don't find that this is something that is mind-blowing. It's not like, all of this money is going to be going to black folk. No, that's just how much money is available in the bank itself. It's no guarantee that everybody who does business there is going to be treated in that capacity with all of that investment. It's just, I just get really antsy when I see, these sort of articles that make it seem like they did something radical, but in reality, that's it's not true. It's just not true.
Yeah. I mean, a little bit. Just the reason I know like there is a venture investment by a bigger bank is I was actually I was working on a project, and one of the heads of one of those larger banks, he was actually involved in the project we were doing, and he talked about, hey, we invested in Greenwood, and he said honestly, the way he was talking, at least he was spinning it in the sense of it got more support than people were initially anticipating, in the sense of like they kind of almost got overwhelmed. Like, okay, like we're gonna do this, but we don't expect it to like explode like it did. Because I remember when I signed up, just to support and look at it and learn a little bit more about it. there was a wait list. Like I said, I think it's live now, but I mean, this thing was launched, I want to say 2019, maybe even 2018, the whole mantra of, banking for the culture. So, I was looking at supporting it, wanting to get an idea of it. And like I said, it took a while for it to really actually come online and get it going. So I think kind of to your point, Mike, is that, that assumption I think was it wasn't there in the thought of like, hey, it wasn't going to explode like that. And it did. And then, like I said, they kind of got a little bit caught off guard, but they didn't realize that they were kind of behind where other Black banks already were. Because there are Black banks in Atlanta. Let's be clear. I believe it's Citizens Trust is one of the more prominent ones that are there. And then, you have them in your other major
Harvard.
cities. Wait, say again?
Harvard.
Yeah. Other major cities, you have them as well. It was just, I think it was more of something that banking is very much something that this one was specifically tailored towards younger people. Because I think they said the whole Black and Latinx. So they were really targeting, that young demographic of people versus, more established older Black professionals already knew about, like you said, the established Black banks that are in, major urban cities.
Yeah, I think maybe part of the play is to maybe open the eyes to the existing Black banks if they want more Black support to be more involved with the Black community. Prime example or first and almost only company that comes to mind is Ariel Investments, where they partner with Charles Schwab for the last 20 years. So Charles Schwab is getting notoriety for, their Black outreach, but it's actually something that was arranged by Ariel Investments, right? And then also with Killer Mike and his presence in Atlanta, this is likely a topic because, or to compete with Stacey Abrams. Remember recently, she started a venture capital firm of sorts, where they actually help you get business funding. I can't remember the specifics of it, but it was something to that sort. So, again, it's kind of monkey see, monkey do, in essence, to play that political role. And often, sometimes, maybe these people have political aspirations of their own. Obviously, they're still yet young enough, and we see that politics is a damn near centuries long game with some of these folks, right? Whether they be in there for 4 years, 6 years, it ends up being 60 at the end of their career. So, I'll pause there.
Yeah, I think too. Recently, at least what I've been hearing in the social media space, and really across all platforms, and I guess probably in general, just for people and in general amongst Black folks, is the term generational wealth has become, it almost seems like household. Financial literacy has been something that really I hadn't heard emphasized coming up. And I really didn't hear anything about probably until, like I said, I got out of college, and it seems to have gotten popular with social media. So I wonder if that's also part of it as well, is that, that people are getting more aware of, hey, invest in this. Like you said, there's, Stacey Abrams, like you said, launched a VC firm. You're seeing more and more Black celebrities who are getting into that. Steph Curry, Venus Williams, I think are a few to come to mind. Even Jay-Z, he had a SPAC, special purpose acquisition company. So, another Wall Street sort of financial vehicle. So I think sort of also this maybe is that, hey, they're seeing more influencers and people in that space playing in these, financial spaces, coupled, like I said, with the rise of just discussion of financial literacy in general, that could have been the play as well, as to try to capitalize on some of that energy.
I mean, for me, from what I've seen is that the rise of this, generational wealth, financial literacy, it kind of came about from what I've seen was after, the riots in Baltimore. This was after Ferguson, and I guess there was a belief amongst a lot of Black people, like, okay, protesting is not enough. You kind of felt that, okay, protesting, organizing is not enough. We have to get our money together, generational wealth. I think that's where it first started, after the Freddie Gray, protests. I think it comes from, I guess it comes from like disillusion that, with, with the Michael Brown protests in Ferguson and Freddie Gray in Baltimore, that, and also, in New York when we had our own, protests, that it was just like, okay, protesting is not enough, that there has to be some form of, you know, getting our money right to kind of, try to influence change within the political space. Because that was one of the complaints at the time. There was a debate that, okay, maybe we have to put some money, make some super PACs to kind of influence some form of change. So I think that's where it came from. And right now it's more so now than ever. Like, you see a lot more Black influencers, sometimes Black scammers, I don't want to name names, that are talking about like, oh, get this fund so we can buy houses and, you know, create the new Black Wall Street. So I think that's kind of where that, you know, kind of where that conversation is happening. But I do remember, like, after Freddie Gray, you saw this explosion of just like talking about generational wealth and, you know, getting your money right, financial literacy. That for me, that's where it started. I don't know, from my end.
Yeah, yeah, and you hit on another thing.
Yeah,
I
let me
forgot about. No, I was going to
go
quickly
ahead,
say,
Brandon, so finishing up so I can go through this article.
Yeah. No, I was going to quickly say that the other thing I think too that sort of raised the awareness for people as well was, you hit on Tulsa. That was around, I feel like 2015, 2016, when that sort of became sort of mainstream. Now everybody knows what Tulsa is, but a decade ago, if you asked a Black person what Tulsa was, a lot of them didn't know. And when people saw that, I think that sort of energized this whole, let's own our own institutions, generational wealth, own our own banks, this and that. That really recharged it as well.
I think with
Shauna dropped this in the chat, but she also had Shauna dropped this in the chat, and she also had a question. Said, "Do you all think that they are trying to create more Black banks to generate capital support when some of the major banks have a history of historically denying Blacks loans and capital?" I think you are seeing more of that now, especially with the data that came out after George Floyd, how Wells Fargo, Bank of America, they were still playing the redlining game. I think you do see more of that now, but I do think that there has to be more federal regulation on the existing banks that did deny access to those people. I think there should be more investigation. I think Dr. Raphael Bostic of the Atlanta Fed has done a tremendous job really pulling the coattails of those folk during the George Floyd uprising by pulling their data. He said, give me the data. Let me see your data. And they refused to give it to him. But when they did turn it over, they saw all types of discrimination against Black folks over the past decade or so. And so we still see these sort of issues. And I think that the driver behind new Black banks is based on the data. But I think new Black banks are a good thing, but I also think that federal contribution and state contribution should be parallel, right? The Africans have a 2063 agenda. We really don't have an agenda at all. We kind of wing it, and play it by ear. And I don't think that that's a strategy that's going to be successful at all. I think we should have a 2040, 2045 agenda. I think we should even align ourselves with the Africans in terms of their agenda, because a lot of the issues that they have over there, we also have the same thing over there. They have a lot of unbanked and underbanked people because they have a lot of people who lack proper identification. In the United States, we have the same issue in predominantly Black neighborhoods. We have a lot of unbanked and underbanked people in predominantly Black neighborhoods, which is why you see Western Union, Checks Cash, and these sort of predatory institutions, because they most Black people are just so woefully underpaid and underfunded. These are the only institutions that exist, and so in comes the new Black banks. Go ahead, Alonzo.
I ironically enough was going to say something similar to a portion of the answer to Shanda's question in terms of the denial to Blacks for a lot of things. So generational wealth is not that new of a concept to the Black community. In the 1800s to 1900s, it was definitely something that was common. What did happen, however, was from the financial sector in multitudes of formats, there was redlining. So obviously with things, and even currently today, with things like certain barriers to entry for investing, certain barriers to entry for, even things like different insurance rates in neighborhoods, but even different life insurance rates for Blacks than others. And that recently stopped in 2021. Things like deceptive sales practices to the Black community, things like, A.L. Williams, right? And the kind of misinformation.
A.L. Williams or A.L. Evans?
I believe it's A.L. Williams.
Okay.
So, but those are kind of things that lead us or led us as a whole to not even trust in many things in the financial industry, right? For example, having a discussion with a young lady, I'm 10,000. I'm not going to give I'll give you 1,000 and then we'll reach 10,000. I'm like, well, that's not how it works, right? So a lot of these barriers of entry are now even mental. So to see or hear things like generational wealth, there's a lot of damage that was done, just like things like distrust for the police that have caused us to stay behind. There's actually a Yahoo Finance article that states Black people buy life insurance more than white people, but we buy it wrong. Generally, we buy based on price, and they buy based on specific reasons, such as income replacement. So what does that mean? Let's talk about generational wealth. If you Google how long a generation is, it's between 20 and 30 years. So if you do that on 20 years and you say the average annual income of a person is $50,000, if you want to leave $50,000 for 20 years, that equals $1 million. On average, Americans only buy $168,000 worth of death benefits. So people are vastly underinsured, which is a quick and easy way to pass down generational wealth. The other difficulty is things like real estate. We pass down generational poverty. People die intestate, meaning without a will, and people also die with mortgages that have family members as co-signers or on the deed or none of the above, yet left to hold the bag, even if you have a final expense policy that pays $25,000. So there's a lot of unfortunate things that our community isn't taught, and it's hampered because according to the Conference of African American Financial Professionals, I believe it's only 6.7% of licensed financial professionals are Black. So even coming into our community is a difficulty. If you're actually on the street level with these guys, I remember being at Mutual of Omaha in Manhattan on 100 Broadway. And I had a white sales director by the name of Steve Eisner. And this guy would not go to, he would say, yo, here's a free lead. Why? Because it was in a project building in either the Bronx or Harlem. And he would not enter those buildings. Therefore, those people didn't even get the glimpse of service, of ways to teach generational wealth. I'll stop there.
Let me try to fly through this article real quick. I won't read the whole thing, but I just want to make sure I cover the initial portion of it. This is from nextcity.org. Sean, let me read this article first. First new Black bank in 20 years breaks the mold for raising startup capital. Adelphi Bank in Columbus, which raised $24 million in startup capital, marks the country's first new Black bank since 2003. Let me zoom in on this. Jordan Miller never thought it was in the cards for him to help start a new bank. Over the course of a 40-year career in banking, he witnessed the numbers of banks across the country dwindle from more than 14,000 to around 5,000 by the time he retired in 2019. But after coming out of retirement to co-found the country's first new Black bank since 2003, the Adelphi Bank co-founder and CEO is really just picking up almost exactly where his predecessors, brothers in his Black fraternity, as it turns out, had left off on the Near East Side of Columbus, Ohio. Quote, we got the name Adelphi Bank from a Black-owned bank that was here in the 1920s, Adelphi Building Savings and Loans Company, Miller says. Three of my fraternity brothers owned it, and they owned the building. That building went up at 818 East Long Street in 1921. It was during what banking historian and author Mercer Barabanon called the golden age of Black banking, as millions of Black Americans left the South during the Great Migration and settled in other parts of the country. Racist zoning and real estate practices consistently steered most of them into segregated neighborhoods like this one named Bronzeville, after the more famous one in Chicago. For a while, the steady influx of new residents into these neighborhoods proved a boon for local businesses, including banks. Between 1900 and 1934, around 130 Black banks and 50 Black credit unions formed in cities across the country. The original Adelphi anchored a thriving Black commercial corridor in Brownsville. A couple of blocks down on Long Street, a Black developer built the Lincoln Theater in 1928, serving Black patrons who were either forbidden entry to or relegated to the balcony sections of the Ohio capital city's downtown theaters. There are multiple reasons why the neighborhood eventually declined, but like many of those once thriving Black neighborhoods in the cities across the country, one of the biggest reasons was racist local officials deciding to ram a federally funded highway through it. Interesting, man. And so this is you know, people always question, I always hear these white conservatives, you know, there's some white liberals who do it too, always questioning like reparations. In this regard, reparations is kind of a just cause, man. We don't know what these communities could have been if it wasn't for this, you know, busting through with highways and things like that. It really frustrates me because you don't know what these things would have turned out to be had they not been so undermined by racist policies. I'm not going to read this whole thing. I just wanted to make sure I covered initially what this was about. And so that's good, man. I really, really look forward to seeing what they do with it.
And you know what, Mike?
20 years.
Go ahead, Chaos Reign.
This is the first, say,
Go ahead, Chaos Reign.
Black bank. You get me? Yeah, get me. It's the new Black bank in over 20 years.
Yep. Yeah.
And I'm thinking that's almost generation. And let's be honest, Mike V. They know what the condition and the progress of Black people in America in a century, if they didn't put certain factors, will be from 2% to roughly, if I had to guess, 25 to 29% of the national wealth of this country in less than in over 100 years. Remember, if you didn't recall, they did like a documentary about how to sell to a Negro. That was after World War II to see what Black people were actions with the money in the first, I think, decade up to 1954. And they ever conclude that once we start spending more with each other and, start, climbing up, because, World War II, we would start to see like an economic boom because America was going to be the top honchos. They said, oh, we need to really tighten up because we can't have them start really spending money. Because now if they spend money, that means they're going to start invest properly, have the business like you see now, and it's going to compete with them. So obviously they had to put some race policies in place and had to tighten it more because they were going to lose their footnote. Because we move very fast as people in less than a generation. Remember, like Carter would have said best, after enslavement, when the Negro has the access, he was able to read and succeed in over 30 years than any other immigrant that comes to this country. So they had to mind and watch what Black people are doing. They had to keep it in a certain stagnation to the point where once they said 2050 does come around, that is we are undermined to the point where it's very hard to climb back up completely with technology now. So I just want to add that input.
Yeah, Mike, and
Go ahead.
another thing you mentioned.
Renaissance.
Oh,
No, go ahead. Speak. Go ahead. Speak. Go ahead.
yeah, Mike, you said something that's very imperative. Is that this is why the case of reparations is there. You know, when you look at history, African American. I mean, so let's look after the Civil War. African Americans were making strides, during Reconstruction, but that was, you know, that was only for a short period of time. And then you add with all the race riots, massacres, these are things that, a lot of conservative states, these are woke history, but this is real history that there was massacres done to African American communities, driven. I mean, entire towns were burned down. And then you add the fact that, in World War One, Black veterans did not get any benefits. World War Two, they they were not even part of the GI Bill. Then you add on redlining. So when you look at the history, if if everything was equal, the Black community would be farther now than it is right now. You know, the when you look at the white conservative talking point is like, oh well, these Negroes can't get their shit together because they're lazy or they don't work hard. I mean, you had Marjorie Green said something the other day that kind of bothered me, where she says like, oh, I know some white folks that are more lazy than Black folks. Basically, in her mindset is that, oh, these Negroes are just lazy. But no, you have to look at the history. Like, okay, despite everything that was against them, they still made strides dealing with Jim Crow, dealing with massacres, dealing with lynchings, dealing with entire Black towns being burned down. Then Black veterans who served in the Spanish American War, World War One, World War Two, they didn't get none of the benefits of GI bills. And then on top of that, redlining. Then when you look at that past that, then you had the heroin epidemic, then you had the crack epidemic. I mean, come on, like anyone who looks at it objectively can see that there was a lot of hurdles that was in Black Americans' way. There's no way you can just say that, oh, well, this is a victim mindset. No, you have to look at it like, despite all of this, you still have Black folks who are successful. They still made it through. But this is the case for reparations because nothing was equal after 1865. Nothing, then there was no equal level field. And then Reconstruction had a short period of time, like, yeah, you had a little bit of that, but it was done away with. So that's why for me, this is the case for reparations. But you know, white conservatives don't want to hear it.
Hey, Mike, I dropped a link in the chat if you don't mind bringing that up when you get a chance to.
Yeah, let me just read this real quick. This is from Shonda. She dropped this from thewallsproject.org. More Black farmers equal more generational wealth. There is more power in owning your own food producing land. This is probably one of the biggest reasons why lawmakers and people in leadership have made it difficult for Black people to become landowners over the last few centuries. Between 1910 and 1997, African Americans lost about 90% of their farmland, according to the Waterkeepers Chesapeake. One of the main causes of this property loss is the heirs' property. It was and still is very common for descendants of Black landowners to not inherit their family's land because they had no will or legal documentation that proves their land ownership. Black people's loss of land goes deep. In the early 1900s, many Black men were lynched because white landowners wanted their land. So it should come as no surprise that today, less than 2% of the farm owners or the farmers in the US are Black. If you don't have land, you can't farm large scale. Black people's loss of land, despite the systemic hurdles in the farming industry, Black farmers are reclaiming their space. We spoke with 2 local farmers who are actively working to educate more people on farming and getting fresh food to more families. So I won't go too far into this. I think we kind of know how this ends, but let me bring up Renaissance Man's article. All right, let me share my screen. Shit. From McKinsey.com, Renaissance Man provided this in the chat. The economic state of Black America, what is and what could be. June 17, 2021 report. Closing racial gaps across the economy is not only about righting historic wrongs, it is about choosing a more dynamic future and realizing the potential of a massively underutilized source of talent to the benefit of all Americans. Oh man, this
No, you don't have
this
to.
is a
it's a report. I just wanted to highlight it, because as you can see to the right, it's available to everyone. There's an executive summary and there's a full report. Now I just wanted to highlight sort of what we're talking about, sort of in pieces. McKinsey, this was done after, I think the catalyst was George Floyd's murder. So this was released roughly about a year later in June 2021. But it just basically looks at all of the disparities that exist in Black America. Like it talks about underutilization of resources of Black America, and what a real investment and change could actually look like. At one point, it points out like some of the solutions they offer, if implemented, could bring 2 million Black people into the middle class for the first time ever. So it's just, like I said, it's just something if people are interested in, they want to learn more about, like, at least it's been studied by, one of the major consulting firms in this country, what they recommend and what areas we're actually behind in, because there's usually, at least in this space, amongst some people, some sort of disputes about gaps and where they exist. This looks at all of it and makes recommendations. So just high level, wanted to point it out if people were interested.
Yeah, indeed. Anybody else have anything you want to add to this?
Looks good. Looks like a good program. The economic state of Black America, what is and what could be do. Remember, Renaissance, you were listening to the other brother stream today. Remember when we talked about the thing that what Black people should be doing? You remember that, Renaissance Man?
C. Paul Granderson. Yeah, he this probably won't go at this angle. This will probably look at more of traditional institutions, but yeah, no, that was a great interview. Those of you all who aren't subscribed, don't listen. The Great Liberators channel, they had Dr. C. Paul Granderson on for an interview today. He sort of talked about the basically the how would you describe it, chaos? What his,
No,
his
well, the whole basis about this thing was submission, but it goes more deeper about the information about just how Black people move and operate, and the things that you're not gonna fix anything if you don't start with the youth. Number one, you get me? To get somebody that's already considered adult, you are behind the eight ball and playing catch up. And case in point, Ransom, I've talked to a few young students that's I think in middle school or just in high school, and the things that they're learning now, this should have been taught to our youth over 20 years ago, in my opinion. Now, a lot of people say there's certain schools, public, or wherever, that they could have gone and learned some of this, but necessarily, if America is dead last education, it is deliberate. They're not investing in the things that matters for American people to potentially compete and to really the resource necessary just to get the basics down for youth, both the boys and the girls, especially the boys. To find out that when I ask them what they learn now, even the things that is affecting us now, that should have been taught like a century. I mean, like 20 or more years ago, in my opinion. But yeah. So like I said, Rennis, man, we have to really make a conscious decision that, and I know most men not gonna hear it. I said we're gonna have to probably deal with some of the males that are young now and deal with them somehow accordingly, best we can. I mean, there's no way around, because they're gonna be the future young men that's gonna really be the problem in our communities, if they even care. I mean, because think about it. When violence only exists through economic problems, and we have a lot of it in our communities. So when they talk about this, that is always go back to the economics, and that means someone's got have to put something in our communities that's a necessity that someone could possibly use, and we don't. I mean, that's something I can say on that. Rest on that.
Well, the
Yeah,
main
yeah.
point the main point that
All right.
that you explain when it comes to education. I mean, I read an article a couple weeks ago that kind of showed the sad state of affairs of American education. I think I read somewhere that 54% of Americans read at a sixth grade level. I mean, that's pretty dire to say the least. And it's interesting because, so I'm a chiropractor. So when I was in clinic in chiropractic school, my clinician told me when you speak to patients, you have to talk to them as if you have to talk to them in a sixth grade level. I guess I don't know if you read that article, whatever, because you have to talk to the average American that way. So it goes to show that the education system as a whole is at a dire state, and for Black people, it's at a very, very, very dire state. And another point I would like to make, Mike, is that you said something how we should have like a 2040 plan, 2030 plan, because we have to think long term. I think there was a report that came out, I think it was like 3, 4 years ago, that said by 2053, Black wealth would be
You mean
zero.
zero?
Now,
That's a projection, but it's
that's a
probably here.
projection, yeah.
It's probably here already, and we just don't know it. Because anytime someone is put out any article, hit piece that projecting, you always got to
Chaos.
think.
Let them finish.
Okay.
Chaos.
All right,
Please.
go ahead. All right.
Yeah, let me make this quick point that so it goes to show that, what that means is when they say, Black wealth will be zero, what it means is that there'll be a big wealth gap within the Black community where you will have no middle class. I mean, when you look at American society right now, the middle class is being destroyed, but the Black middle class got devastated in 2008, with the real estate crisis, and now we have inflation, stagflation, et cetera, et cetera. But the point is that we need to have a long-term plan because Black wealth is deteriorating at a rapid rate. And there's a lot of factors. 2008 plays a role. You also have that I heard a live a couple weeks ago that talked about how wealth lasts about 2-3 generations, and that um the key generation is the second generation. And I've seen it in my community. I'm Haitian American, and a lot of Haitians that came to New York City that own homes in, let's say, Long Island, the first generation, the second generation are fuck ups, and all that wealth is gone. So I think the key is that that second generation is not maintaining that wealth, and you add the fact of just 2008. People don't talk about 2008 was a devastating effect on the Black middle class, and now we have stagflation coming. Well, stagflation is here, to say the least, and it's another, how would I say, torpedo within the Black middle class. So basically, the point I'm making is that we need to have a long-term plan because things are dire. And I think the issue with the Black community is we don't take these issues seriously. We don't say how dire these things are. I mean, when I read the report that by 2053 Black wealth is zero, that should have been a wake-up call. That scared me, but no one really talked about it. So yeah.
Any other last closing thoughts from anybody
Yeah,
else?
really briefly, a brother of mine spoke to me some years back. At the time, he was in his 40s. I was in my late 20s, and he asked me. He was like, "Do guys your age talk about things like politics or just the latest Lil Wayne verse?" And now that I'm encroaching my 40s, I understand more of what that question was about. At the time, I didn't. And it's probably shameful that I didn't, because a lot of people are, very politically inclined. But politics is something that, most people are like, oh, politics and religion, I don't discuss them. Well, if you don't discuss politics, things won't change. And I think that that's something that's very rampant in our community. So I'll pause there.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree in that regard. There's a lot of misinformation around politics. A lot of people were very cynical about it. A lot of people feel like they were promised something and it wasn't delivered, so they become cynical on the whole entire process. But this is something that really goes back to as far as Carter G. Woodson and the miseducation of the Negro. And he talked about one of the areas of that he saw in Black America was the neglect of politics, and unfortunately, it seems like some of that apathy is still with us. I think you are seeing more awareness. I think especially now with things that people thought were kind of secure and have kind of taken for granted, those things have kind of become threatened by the far right and its agenda for this country. So I'm hoping that will be a renaissance for some people to get more engaged and pay more attention, coupled with, like I said, the rise of social media, with a more of an emphasis placed on these things of financial literacy. I am, despite all of, like I said, some of the discouraging things you do see, I am impressed by some of the things I'm seeing from Black entrepreneurs, whether it be people getting into tech, I've seen numerous channels of people who, even though they're a small percentage, we talked about of Blacks getting into farming. So while there is, like I said, cause for concern, I do think also that there are some people out here who are doing some really good things. We talked about Ariel Investments, John Ariel, his investment firm. I know Harlem Capital, that's another one. Some MBAs that are basically trying to create more founders, more people of color. And in the VC space. So there are a lot of good things out there as well that we didn't have. So people just have to focus in and get serious.
Yeah. Hey man.
All right. Thank you all for joining us. Please hit the like button. Yeah, Chaos, I'm closing out.
Can I say one last thing?
Yeah, thank you all for joining us. Please hit the like button. I need to close out, Chaos. Thank you all for joining us. Please hit the like button on your way out and hit that notification bell so you get all the updates from the Black Brain Trust.